What if I told you you didn't have to cut costs to increase your margins as a dog breeder? A lot of breeders focus strictly on reducing their expenses and spending less instead of focusing on breeding better, which will allow them to increase their business. Well, in today's masterclass, we're covering what it means to not cut corners as a dog breeder and how it can actually improve your margins.
So Austin, the real cost of cutting corners, for me, I've noticed picking the right stud or the wrong stud for that matter, whether they're health tested or not, has cost me in some of my past breedings. What do you think is the best bet going forward?
That's a really good question. So when we talk about cutting corners, we got to think about what does it mean to do things the right way versus doing them the wrong way, right? So like choosing a stud who's health tested versus one who maybe costs less. It's the same thing like buying a car that costs less versus one that comes with the warranty. What are you producing? Like, what are you creating? So if I'm somebody who, as a breeder, I understand I am also creating, and I don't like to use this as a technical term, but if we're breeders, we're creating puppies, and these puppies essentially are the quality of I guess you could say product that we are creating. So if this is a product essentially that we're giving to people because they're purchasing it, how can we make sure that this is up to par with what is worth somebody buying? If we are cutting corners, we will get cut short. So like if I try to avoid these things on the front end where I don't pay as much here and I cut corners here so I can save money, you end up paying for it later, which is where you have unhealthy puppies or maybe refunds that people are requesting because dogs are limping and stuff like that. So you have to ask yourself, do I want to think long term or have short term gratification? Does that make sense?
Yep.
100%.
Yes, sir.
So Austin, when investing initially into your program, how do you ensure that you're financially stable enough to where you won't have to run into programs like, hey, I can't afford to take them to the vet the way I need to, or I can't afford to get them the extra supplements to make sure that my new litter of puppies is going to develop the way they need to and whatnot?
Well, it's a really good question. So we see often in this industry that people get started thinking about how they can save money. Like you see a bunch of price shoppers. They're looking at your program. I want to breed, but I'm not willing to spend more than X, right?
Right.
And so if you're getting something of quality, it is going to cost money, and you should be expecting that if you want to start the right way. But when you think about your program long term, if I'm looking to have a litter and I don't have money for this, then technically you shouldn't breed unless you can afford the unexpected expenses.
Absolutely.
Because what happens if there's an emergency with your female and you don't have the money set aside to go in for an emergency C-section, or if she's unhealthy, right? You're essentially gambling, hoping that everything works out. And so this is why we see a lot of breeders try to go to people that don't necessarily have the right credentials or licenses to get things done, because they're like, I'd rather spend $150 versus $300 to make sure it's done perfectly. You end up having to pay for it in the long run because, again, it does catch up with you eventually. It's like you're dodging a bullet. It's like Russian roulette, right?
Yeah, okay.
You know, it's like I'm playing this game of, is this going to work out for me long term? Probably not. There is no business you can think about, like think about Nike or any other business out there that has been founded and created successfully by them cutting corners, right? There's a difference between being wise with your money and understanding where every penny should go and having cost allocated, to whatever you're supposed to spend, versus looking at things and cutting costs because you may not have the money. You should not breed if you don't have money to breed.
Simple as that.
Because if you're signing up for breeding and you don't have money and you're hoping these puppies pay for themselves, you're signing up for an expensive hobby. And we talked about this earlier, breeder burnout. You're essentially burning yourself out before you even have a chance to get started, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
100%.
Because you're starting out behind, essentially.
Behind. No, every business, regardless of what business you're in, is going to require an investment. Trying to start a business by not investing is the wrong mindset. You need to invest in yourself. You need to invest in your program. And investing is not just about money. It's also your time. And it's also, I don't know how to really draw a brain. Let's just say that's a brain, right? It's your brain too. So knowledge, time, and money. This is the investments you need to make. Now I'm going to give you guys an example of what you should do in each case and scenario. Let's say you don't have money. Well, if you don't have money, you need to spend your time learning so you can create income. If you have money, but you don't have the knowledge to create success, you need to use your time and your money to invest in your knowledge. If you don't have enough time, which a lot of people, like, they sign up for breeding and they can't really whelp the puppies, run the social media, handle the sales, do all of these different things. If you don't have time, you need to have the money and your knowledge to be able to invest in your time, right? Because if I'm a business owner, I'm looking at how can I scale? How can I build something that can work without me? If you are signing up for a business and you are working for yourself and you essentially are, how can I put it? If the business will not survive without you for more than 24 hours, if you don't do anything, 48 hours, it's just a high-paying job. It's not a business. Businesses are supposed to be assets, right? They're supposed to be things that we are able to build so that way long-term it produces results for us time and time again. But breeders get into this industry thinking about it as how can I eliminate my job as soon as possible? And as a byproduct of that, we were talking about how to create a profitable breeding business. They cut the cost to increase their margin. But there is no margin to cut because they're not even making enough money to be able to say that it was worth it, right?
Right.
So that's why we don't cut corners.
Austin, so I think for people when they're putting breedings together, and cutting corners maybe is a big thing when it comes to really doing your research on both bloodlines or maybe how the bloodlines are put together.
Yeah.
Or, seeing from somebody else's faults in the past. What do you think is the best way to go about the proper research needed so you're not putting a breeding together that
It's going to be
off
bad.
just these look good, let's throw them together versus knowing the outcome at the end of the day.
Hey, Breedwise fam. A lot of breeders unfortunately go through expensive lessons and a lot of expensive mistakes before they realize what they should have done in the beginning. My job is to make sure that you don't have to go through that trial and error so that way you can save yourself time and increase the upside for yourself, meaning you produce healthier dogs and grow a successful program. Now, if that sounds like something that would interest you, we have a very special opportunity where we're offering free strategy sessions to breeders who want to level up. If that sounds like you, click the link below, schedule your free strategy session, and we'll see you soon. So I'm going to continue to refer to this in these master classes, right? It's the breeder trifecta. So we have the market, we have your vision, and then we have the standard for your breed. Now, this is the order that a lot of people usually breed in today's breeding economy, and that is unfortunate because this is the wrong order. If I'm looking at the market, hoping that I put together dogs and it clicks because they look good, everybody's hyped about this specific stud or this specific bloodline, and I have a female that I think might, but I really don't know, and so I'm just basing it off of the market, that's not breeding. Breeding is a science. You need to know what you're doing, and we're always going to be learning as breeders, right? It's a never-ending, that's why it's so important to be humble in this aspect because we never know enough, right? We need to understand what the standard is in our breed, genetically and phenotypically. What that means is this is what everybody's so hung up on is what does my dog look like? Physical appearance. But they only look here. And so because they don't understand where their dogs are genetically for their breed, they never do anything to actually better their breed. They think that just putting together a breeding is bettering the breed because it looks good. That's not how it works. You need to make sure that you're doing more than just looking at pedigree and what the dog looks like when you're confirming a breeding for yourself. Like you mentioned, health testing. How healthy is the dog that I'm breeding to?
Yep.
How healthy is the dog that I have? Have I done the steps as far as genetic testing or health testing to ensure that this breeding is actually going to be complementary, or is it going to be detrimental to my program long term? Because you may not see it now, but if you're breeding, this is a long-term game. We're talking about generations of lineage. So if one generation looks good, but the health is under the skin terrible, then you have made a bad investment as a breeder. But what we see time and time again with these cutting corners is people look at the market and they say, you know what, I like this about that dog, I like this about that dog, this is what I'm going to try and create with my own program. And then they neglect the genetics and the phenotype. They may consider this here when they look at the market like this is what I'm going for, but they actually have no way to predict the outcome because they don't do the research to understand what they're producing or what they should be looking to create. Or how can you create it? Because certain flaws within a dog, I'll give you an example. Let's say your dog has a overbite, underbite, high rear, different things of that sort. If we don't know how long it would take to breed that out of the line, or if we're not intentionally breeding to correct our dogs according to our standards, then how can we make sure that our dogs are improving in our program? So every single dog in your yard, you need to look at them and say, what flaws do they have according to the standard? What is their genetic panel showing in terms of genetic defects or variants or potential, everybody looks at color as the main factor, but what else do they have? What variants are common within the breed that you need to be aware of so you can eliminate genetic risk? There is no such thing as a perfect dog. Let's get that out there. But there is such thing as a dog that should not be bred, which is the reason why we have pet home versus breeding rights. Only 2 dogs from my program in each litter will be considered breeding quality, while the rest is going to be pet home. Why is that? Because even if it looks good, one, you need to make sure you have exclusivity, and you do need to make sure every dog you're allowing to be bred is one that deserves that right? And also, not everybody's meant to be a breeder, right? So there's that. So we have genetics and phenotype. This is the reverse. This is how it should go. I need to understand what the standard is for my breed, genetically and phenotypically, so I know what I'm aiming for. How much genetic diversity does this breed have? Is there enough variations of our lines out there, right? What's so common in these different areas? How many people are line breeding, outcrossing, or inbreeding? What does my dog need according to its COI, which is its coefficient of inbreeding, right? Which our geneticists at Breedwise will be going into more detail about, right? I want to leave that to the experts, right? The COI, and then the phenotype when it comes down to their physical appearance. What flaws do they have that I can see? And if you want to avoid cutting costs and making the wrong decision, go to the dog in person and put your hands on it to see if it's legitimately going to correct your dog phenotypically and also temperamentally.
Yes.
What's the temperament of the dog? How are they raised? How is this breeder taking care of their dog before I go and breed to it? Do I know if this dog is actually going to be good around dogs, good around children, good around families? Can I have that assurance if that's the goal for your program, right? So you need to check all of your boxes before you make an investment in a puppy, before you make an investment in a stud, before you even go into business with anybody. Make sure you know what you're doing, right? So that's how you have standards for yourself, have standards for your dogs, and reflect on your breed standard, genetically and phenotypically, and then you move to your vision. Your vision for your program, your vision for your dogs should always be an improvement on what already is. It's how can I make the standard better? What can I do to potentially fix my dogs? The simplest way to put it is if my dogs are flawed in X way, then I should look at them and say my vision is to improve these different flaws that they have. Now that's the vision. I want to make improvements on what I already have. We don't need to go and create something new and become scientists and create new breeds because we think that that's going to bring us more money and da-da-da-da. We don't need to do that. The standard is always going to sell. That is going to be the most lucrative thing because it was created for a reason, right? Next thing is, after the vision of how we can improve, the market rewards those who are consistent. If I see a consistent look in your program, am I more than likely going to invest with you or somebody who just tries to do something new every single time? Yeah. Because people have taste. You like a specific food or car or clothes because it's consistent with what you like. But if you're doing something new every single time because the market is always changing and you're just going with trends, you have no real business. You are just hoping that you roll the dice and you cash in. But yeah, good masterclass.